The August 15, 2025, summit in Alaska between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, billed as a pivotal step toward peace in Ukraine, concluded without a ceasefire or any concrete agreements. Despite the lack of tangible results, the meeting was a significant diplomatic victory for Putin, who was welcomed back onto the world stage with full presidential pageantry after years of isolation following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The summit's most significant outcome was a strategic shift from President Trump. He appeared to abandon his and his allies' long-standing demand for a ceasefire as a precondition for talks, instead adopting the Kremlin's preference for negotiating a comprehensive peace agreement directly. This move effectively puts the onus on Ukraine to make concessions, with Trump reportedly telling Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to make a deal with Russia. While Trump hailed the meeting as extremely productive, analysts widely concur that Putin achieved his primary objectives without offering any concessions, leaving Alaska with his strategic position strengthened and more time to continue his military campaign in Ukraine. The aftermath includes a scheduled meeting between Trump and Zelensky in Washington and deep concern among European allies about the future of support for Ukraine. On August 15, 2025, all eyes turned to Anchorage, Alaska, a location laden with historical symbolism as a former Russian territory sold to the U.S. in 1867. Here, U.S. President Donald Trump, in his second term, met with Russian President Vladimir Putin for their first face-to-face talks since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began in 2022. The summit was the culmination of Trump's campaign promise to end the war, a pledge he famously claimed he could fulfill in 24 hours. Leading up to the meeting, expectations were deliberately managed. The White House framed the summit as a feel-out meeting and a listening session, a stark contrast to Trump's earlier threats of severe consequences for Russia if peace wasn't achieved. This diplomatic maneuvering took place against a backdrop of continued fighting, with Russian forces making gains in Ukraine's Donetsk region even as the summit was being prepared. For Ukraine and its European allies, the summit was a source of deep anxiety. Excluded from the direct talks, President Volodymyr Zelensky spent the week shoring up support from European leaders, all of whom were wary that Trump might broker a deal at Ukraine's expense. The central goal for the U.S. was to initiate a ceasefire, but for Russia, the objectives were far broader: to break its international isolation, legitimize its military campaign, and shift the diplomatic narrative in its favor. What unfolded at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson was less a tense negotiation and more a masterclass in political theater, orchestrated to Putin's benefit. As the Russian president's plane landed, he was greeted not as an international pariah with an ICC arrest warrant, but as a respected world leader. A red carpet was rolled out, and President Trump was seen clapping as Putin approached for a warm handshake. The pageantry continued. Putin was chauffeured from the tarmac in Trump's presidential limousine, the Beast, grinning from the window, a powerful visual broadcast worldwide. This spectacle was a stunning diplomatic rehabilitation. Maria Zakharova, the spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, gloated on Telegram that the world had just witnessed the red carpet greeting for the Russian president in the United States, effectively ending talk of Russia's isolation. The atmosphere between the two leaders was one of bonhomie and mutual respect. The talks themselves, however, were surprisingly brief. Initially anticipated to last up to 7 hours, the meeting concluded in under 3. The subsequent joint press conference was even shorter, lasting less than 15 minutes, with both leaders reading vague, prepared statements and taking no questions from the press. This carefully controlled presentation gave the impression of progress while revealing nothing of substance. The summit, held under the hopeful slogan "Pursuing Peace," ended with a whimper. President Trump, who had gone into the meeting stating he won't be happy without a ceasefire, emerged to concede they had failed to reach an agreement. "We didn't get there," he admitted, while adding his signature optimistic spin. "We haven't quite got there, but we've made some headway." There's no deal until there's a deal. Putin, for his part, offered nothing but pleasantries and repeated his standard talking points. He called the talks constructive and thanked Trump for the invitation, but reiterated that a lasting settlement must address the root causes of the conflict and Russia's security concerns. Kremlin code for the demilitarization of Ukraine and a block on its NATO membership. The lack of a concrete outcome was the defining feature of the summit. No ceasefire was announced, no joint statement of principles was released, and no clear next steps were defined. The meeting that was supposed to end a war ended with little more than an invitation from Putin for Trump to visit Moscow. An offer Trump acknowledged would get him a little heat, but which he said could possibly happen. The most significant and alarming development from the Alaska summit was not what was said, but the strategic ground Trump conceded. After the meeting, Trump appeared to completely abandon the long-held position of Ukraine and its Western allies that a ceasefire must precede any broader peace negotiations. In a social media post following calls with European leaders and President Zelensky, Trump declared that it was determined by all that the best way to end the horrific war is to go directly to a peace agreement and not a mere ceasefire agreement. This statement was a stunning reversal, aligning the U.S. position directly with the Kremlin's long-standing demand. This pivot effectively validates Russia's strategy of using its military presence to force a comprehensive political settlement on its own terms. This shift was further reinforced by reports that Putin had demanded control over the entire Donetsk region in exchange for freezing the front lines, a proposal Trump then relayed to Zelensky. By adopting Russia's framework, Trump has dramatically increased the pressure on Kyiv. In an interview with Fox News, he made this explicit, stating that it was now up to President Zelensky to get it done and that he should make the deal because Russia is a very big power and they're not. By nearly every metric, Vladimir Putin was the unambiguous winner of the Alaska summit. He arrived in the United States as an isolated leader waging a brutal war and left with a series of major strategic gains, all without making a single tangible concession. The red carpet welcome and the summit itself shattered the illusion that he was isolated from the international community and affirmed his status as a global power with which the United States must negotiate. This was a victory for Putin, gaining legitimacy and recognition. Trump's threats of severe consequences for Russia if it doesn't move toward peace never materialized. Putin faced no new sanctions or pressure. The result, no consequences. Adoption of Russian framework. He successfully persuaded the U.S. president to adopt his preferred path to a settlement, shifting the focus from a ceasefire to a comprehensive deal that would likely involve Ukrainian territorial and sovereignty concessions. Buying more time, the summit provided a diplomatic distraction that allows Russia's military to continue its grinding offensive in Ukraine, with time now firmly on Moscow's side. In contrast, President Trump came away empty-handed. He failed to secure the ceasefire he had set as his goal and was left to praise a productive meeting that produced no results. As one analyst put it, the summit was 1-0 for Putin. The aftermath, pressure, phone calls, and a printer mishap. The immediate fallout from the summit saw a flurry of diplomatic activity. Trump quickly placed calls to President Zelensky and European leaders to brief them on the talks. The key development was the announcement that Zelensky would travel to Washington, D.C. to meet with Trump at the White House on Monday, August 18th. This meeting is now fraught with tension, as Zelensky will be under immense pressure to accept a deal on terms largely dictated by Moscow and now echoed by Washington. Reactions from European capitals and U.S. lawmakers were mixed, ranging from alarm to cautious skepticism. Lithuanian Defense Minister Oviel Sakalin dismissed Putin's comments as gaslighting and veiled threats, while others in Kyiv felt Putin had simply bought himself more time. Adding a layer of farce to the high-stakes diplomacy, it was later reported that sensitive documents with U.S. State Department markings detailing the summit's schedule, contact information for officials, and even phonetic pronunciations of names were discovered left behind in a publicly accessible hotel printer in Alaska. A White House spokesperson reportedly did not consider the incident a security breach, a statement as baffling as the error itself. What's next? A murky and perilous path. The path forward is now more uncertain than ever. While Trump has floated the idea of a trilateral summit with both Putin and Zelensky, the Kremlin has denied this was even discussed, and it remains a remote possibility. The immediate future hinges on President Zelensky's visit to Washington. He faces an unenviable choice: resist the pressure from his most powerful backer and risk a reduction in support, or agree to a deal that could mean ceding sovereign territory and compromising Ukraine's future for a peace that may not last. The Alaska summit did not turn into a new Munich, where territory was explicitly signed away. However, many analysts fear it could become a new Yalta, where great powers decide the fate of smaller nations over their heads. Putin left Alaska emboldened, likely to prolong the war to maximize his leverage. For Ukraine and its allies, the cold reality is that the diplomatic ground has shifted beneath their feet, and the fight for their future has just become significantly more complicated.